Good morning, guys. Today we're going to talk about the coronavirus. We've talked about cells before, we've talked about molecules before, we've talked about life before, but we haven't spent much time talking about the virus and what it does. There are a lot of things we could talk about regarding the virus, but my cat is on the counter. I'll be right back. Today we're going to talk about this enemy that we're battling. Earlier this month we got some great news about progress on a coronavirus vaccine. We're looking forward to seeing how that plays out and seeing if everybody can get the vaccine. But before we get into vaccines, we need to understand how a virus works. A virus is going to be defeated by a vaccine, possibly, but in order for that to happen, we need to know what a virus does and how a vaccine works. So a virus is really just a package of DNA. It might be alive. Scientists still argue whether it's alive or not. There's a lot of things that a virus can't do on its own, and that's one of the arguments for why it might not be alive. But it definitely knows how to use other organisms to get things done. So maybe it does know what it's doing. Maybe it is alive. Cells are the basic unit of life. Here's a model of a cell that one of my students made a few years ago. It's got all of the basic structures from the nucleus to the outer cell wall. Not all cells look like this. Some cells look quite different, but this is a model that tells you most of the basic things that most cells have. You have cells in your nose, you have cells down to your toes. Some organisms are made out of a single cell, some organisms have millions of cells. Everything that we think of as alive has at least one cell, except viruses. A virus is a package of DNA wrapped in a protein coat. Now the DNA is our code. DNA is what is the code for how your cells work. DNA is the code for how to build your body, how to work your systems. DNA is the language of life. The cells in your body have lots of defenses against invaders, and you are invaded all of the time. You've got bacteria, you've got parasites, you've got viruses, and most of the time your body defends against these very well. You don't even notice that you've been attacked, and the body's already taken care of it. Defeat of an invader depends on knowledge of what belongs and what doesn't belong. If you have a virus attacking a cell and it gets to the cell and the cell wall says, no, you don't belong here, and it doesn't get into the cell wall, then it hasn't invaded and you are successful. A cell knows what belongs based on these protein markers. The protein markers are on all of these molecules that are floating in the area where the cell is, and as they touch the cell is reading those protein markers to say, oh, I know what you are. You are a sugar molecule, or you're a hormone, or you're something else. This is what tells the cell what is touching it. Those markers are like a lock and key. They are the key to get into the cell. If you have the right marker, then the cell will not only allow you to pass in, it will welcome you, and it might even help you along the way. In the case of COVID, the marker is called ACE2. There's an ACE2 lock and key system that the COVID virus to get into the cell. Now, normally these ACE2 codes are on a different molecule that is intended to regulate your blood pressure, to tell your cells when to have less blood pressure, which is a good thing for your body. Your body needs to be able to increase and decrease your blood pressure. The cells that normally use the ACE2 receptors can change your blood pressure, and that's a good thing. COVID has started using these same receptors to trick the cell into bringing it inside. Let's talk about how this works. Remember that glucose sugar that we talked about earlier, the one that plants make with photosynthesis? Well, your cells need that glucose in order to get energy. The mitochondria in here are going to want to break that down into little energy packets. So if you have a glucose molecule, it's going to be floating around, and it will come up to this cell and it won't be able to get in. In order for it to get in, it has a molecule that the body produces called insulin that connects to part of it with one of these keys. The insulin connects and says, open up, let this glucose molecule in. Now there's a couple of ways this can happen. Just like this pipe, there is a pathway that the molecule could come through to get into the cell. If the molecule is not the right size, it won't fit through here. But if the molecule has the right marker protein, the size of the pipe changes, and suddenly that protein can go into the cell. Nom nom. Different viruses have different types of marker proteins, and as they go through their cycles, they mutate and they change, and sometimes one virus that is not terribly dangerous to us changes its marker protein to something that our cells are more likely to receive. If our cells receive it, then it's more likely to survive and pass those traits on to the next generation of viruses. This is one of the reasons why we get multiple versions of the flu vaccine and a new version every year, because the flu virus is always mutating and these markers are going to be different every year. Now, the marker that's on the outside of the COVID virus is called ACE2. And this ACE2 lock and key mechanism doesn't fit into every cell in your body. It fits into cells that have the ACE2 receptor. The ACE2 receptor is on cells in your nose and your lungs and your heart and your kidneys and your intestines. That's enough to make this as dangerous as possible to most of your body systems. One of the reasons we wear masks over our mouth and our noses is so that those receptors in the nose and in the lungs don't make contact with this. There aren't receptors for ACE2 on the outside of your skin. So if a virus lands on the outside of your skin, it's not going to get into your body. If the COVID virus gets onto your skin and then you wipe your nose, well, now you've put that virus off of your skin into your nose, and it's going to make progress getting into your body. Last thing I'm going to talk about today, really quickly, because we could go on and on and on for days about this stuff, but is what does the virus do once it gets into the cell? So once it makes its way into the cell, remember it has the DNA, it has the code telling the cell all the kinds of things that it can do. Once it gets into the cell, the first thing it does is it tells the cell, make more of me. It reproduces. So suddenly the cell that was using all of its parts to repair itself, to build new parts of itself, to eat things, to digest things, to create packets of energy. Suddenly it stops doing that and it starts using all of its resources to build new viruses. And it will build viruses and build viruses and build viruses, and it will fill up with viruses while the rest of the cell is dying. When the cell dies, it breaks apart and all of those viruses spread throughout the body. If this was a cell in your lungs or your intestines or in your heart or something like that, and it was supposed to be doing a job for your body, it's no longer doing that job for your body. Suddenly this system of your body is breaking down. I hope this has given you a little bit of an idea of how the coronavirus works and how it gets into our bodies, how it infects our cells, and what it does once it gets inside. We'll talk more about this and about how vaccines work in a later episode. Check out these links, learn a little more, and have a great day.